Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Natural Hydrogen Exploration Errors and Misconceptions. I'm Adnes Biogradlia, your host for today's session. We're thrilled to have you here with us as we dive into the world of natural hydrogen, a topic that's generating more buzz than a beehive on espresso. Today, we're joined by two distinguished experts, Vitaly Vidavskiy and Nikolay Larin, who will be with us via audio connection. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. So we
Can
can
you
start.
can you give us a short introduction first?
Yes, thank you much, Ernest. Thank you much for having us. Nikolay will try to join us by the audio. We are in business for quite a while, and we've been waiting for this wave of interest towards natural hydrogen for several decades. While this story is developing right in front of our eyes, we definitely see some things that could be possibly improved, straightened up, and as a result, the efficiency of the processes, procedures, and exploration work could be rather improved. So we will appreciate if the audience don't take this webinar as criticizing. We've been in this subject for way too long. We are here to help, and we are here to hopefully resolve some issues and some questions which we are absolutely certain raise before our peers in the process of exploration for natural hydrogen.
Since we're talking about experience, their combined expertise will help us navigate the complexities of natural hydrogen exploration. Think of them as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson of natural hydrogen, minus the Victorian attire and pipe, of course. So here's our agenda for the next hour. The current landscape of natural hydrogen exploration, the exploration process, effective strategies for exploration, the resources morphology, evaluation methods for natural hydrogen resources, common errors and misconceptions in exploration. We'll wrap up with a Q&A session, so please submit your questions via DM or comments during the webinar, of course. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Today we will review and attempt to analyze the current status of exploration for natural hydrogen worldwide. We try to collect and examine the existing tendencies and paths pursued by the industry players. We explain what seems to be wrong with them and how we suggest to improve the situation. First of all, quick introduction of our team. Together, we combine over 60 years of experience in natural hydrogen. So we may say we know what we are talking about when it comes to the subject. So first of all, chapter 1, let's see who the players are on the natural hydrogen landscape. So first of all, junior companies are so far the only active players on the natural hydrogen stage, almost exclusively. They are quite geographically spread, so this industry is still lacking more attention. Some juniors are financed better than the others. However, the ability to raise money is mostly the function of being financially educated and quite often well-connected, which may have little to do with actually possessing knowledge about the subject and experience in dealing with it. Number two, international companies being the most capable and the most interested potential players are in the passive mode so far, allowing juniors to bear all the risks in order to enter the game later, although at a much higher price as it usually happens. if this happens at all. Petroleum companies are the most suitable actors in the natural hydrogen domain, possessing all necessary technologies for its development. However, at this point, they are expected to sponsor the ailing green hydrogen industry, which involvement they are trying to avoid, mostly for good reason. Mining companies are the potential players too, being in a great need of affordable hydrogen to decarbonize their operations. Besides, the majority of natural hydrogen play models makes a good fit for them. Next, green investment funds are in the process of quietly pulling out from the green hydrogen projects, electrolysis projects. Natural hydrogen looks attractive for them. However, they indeed mind the risks, which always will be there, similar to any subsurface project. The whole story is about managing and mitigating these risks, nothing new. Venture capitalists these days quite often operate similarly to conventional investment funds, just accepting slightly higher risks for higher margins. So they mostly behave the same. Academia, trying to catch up. Official academia in general have missed on the novice of natural hydrogen, having had been denying it altogether for several decades, which we, Nikolay and I, we know it firsthand. Currently, they are desperately trying to stay in the game, often having little to contribute, since this requires reviewing the prevailing mainstream concepts. Some of them wouldn't mind a cosmetic change, but strictly within the consensus model framework. And governments, the last but not the least, as a main regulator body, every government have their own agenda, and natural hydrogen, being covered by several legislation facets, may become, depending on the situation, may become a winning card, a bargaining chip, or may fall victim. Chapter 2. This is, we try to put together a rather simplified flow chart, the typical process path for some certain chunk of our peers in this industry. So working in the area of natural hydrogen research and exploration for several decades, we were pleasantly surprised by how many entities all of a sudden made the decision to dive into this subject. So the story goes, not always, but quite often goes as follows. So the company makes the decision to dive into this new opportunity. Then the question rises, since there is no written script for the procedures, for the research, for the exploration operations, how do we do it? Well, first call scenario is, let's call the official academia. Question is, do they really know? More often than not, they say, of course, they say they do. The next step, the R&D or any other type of agreement is definitely signed. Time passes, 6 to 12 months later, the results are usually not very impressive. Once again, we know it firsthand. We watch these entities very close, and we know that there are very few cases when they can brag about some success. We have a problem. Another scenario, the official academia say they do know, but it doesn't sound really convincing. So what do we do? Hey, let's develop our own model. 12 months later, the same result. So the major part of the industry seems to be repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So we collected some of the most typical assumptions that the mainstream hydrogen exploration strategies are based upon. Number one, king of the kings, separatization. Separatization process is suggested to play the similar role to a Karajan source rock in oil and gas. Well, this may not be true. Well, the first biggest question is, where does the water for these reactions come from? The commonly offered answer is meteoritic, which is from precipitation, which is very hard to imagine. provided that the water is capable of penetrating down below the surface, down to 3 to 5 kilometers. Then it is unable to provide to penetrate deeper because of the lithostatic pressure growth. While serpentinization processes take place deeper than 5, 10, maybe even 20 kilometers. The most common answer is, well, it comes from somewhere. B, reactions. So these reactions, providing hydrogen as a product of the serpentinization processes, may be successfully modeled in the lab, and it happens quite often. However, the reaction windows, such as pressure, temperature, pH factor, redox balances, etc., are quite narrow, and the equations will shift instantly once the conditions change, which happens in the nature all the time. Volumes. Biggest problem is that the quantitative analysis of these reactions does not support commercial volumes of hydrogen allegedly generated through them. Through with this one, number 2, ferrolysis, which is in fact oxidation process of the ferrous iron 2 into ferric iron 3 by means of water reaction with the BIFs, banded iron formations, or mafic rocks. So the reactions are similar to serpentinization, give or take, essentially. The source of water is, once again, the biggest problem for this set of reactions. This viewpoint is based on the assumption that ferrous iron 2 contained in the rocks is being oxidized, as we say, by water into ferric iron 3. However, this mainstream viewpoint had been challenged on multiple occasions, mainly suggesting that the reaction goes in the opposite direction. Why not? Thing is, what we see now and here is just a snapshot of the reaction. Its kinematics depend on multiple factors, which are not always taken into consideration. Number 3, radiolysis. True thing, no problem. Radiolysis through the nuclear decay sequences is a real thing, but it takes a long time, in fact, millions of years, to produce any significant volume of hydrogen. For all this time, produced hydrogen is supposed to be trapped and stored somewhere. However, this trapping part for such long periods of time represents quite a bit of a problem, which will be demonstrated and discussed on the next slide. Trapping. Well, we humans struggle to contain hydrogen on the surface in the specialized gas-tight vessels fabricated of premium steel grades. I have a big problem with imagining hydrogen allegedly being trapped in naturally fractured, cracked, and sheared rocks for millions of years. Because, number 1, hydrogen has the smallest atom in the universe, the second smallest atom after helium. Hydrogen immediately starts reacting with anything it comes in contact with, being a strong chemical reducing agent, altering impermeable hosting rocks into much softer ones. And what about replenishment? For instance, the only known hydrogen well in Mali producing for a dozen of years must be replenished, and there is a common opinion about that. So the question is where all this hydrogen for that temporary accumulation comes from. So in a summary, even if the discussed geochemical reactions take place in the crust somewhere for some period of time, it must be problematic to get hydrogen produced through them, trapped for any substantial period of time. The latest, the new kid on the block, so-called orange hydrogen, stimulated hydrogen. So for us, first of all, since it is based on the ferrolysis mechanism, it is essentially an indirect recognition of natural ferrolysis shortcomings. topics, including mostly the issues with the water source discussed earlier. So the idea is similar to fracking. However, frac is designed for hydrocarbons under pressure to enhance sandstone's porosity and permeability. Hydrogen does not reside in tight or porous pressurized deposits, as discussed earlier. So this is a completely different process design, hence with unpredictable results. Petrophysically speaking, stimulating banded iron formations, BIFs, or massive mafic formations is a process completely different from fracking sedimentary rocks. In BIF or mafics, these reactions will be of a superficial nature, 2D, as opposed to the volumetric processes, 3D processes in sedimentary rocks matrix, in case of frac. Controlling these reactions in BIFs or mafics and ensuring they progress in the right direction is a tremendous task, which may take decades to develop the solution for. So the models proposed by the mainstream academia don't seem to be working, mostly. So what's left? Let's see what we can offer to the community. Deep faults in the crystalline basement. Thank you, USGS, for including this mechanism into your list, into this wonderful block chart. However, the trick is not to just find a deep communicating fault. This would be way too simple. More importantly, the goal is to identify a deep-seated conduit of natural hydrogen feeding into such fault. This is the expertise we offer to our business partners. So quickly, just intermediate summary. So what lessons can we hopefully learn? So first of all, if it looks easy on the surface, it may be the result of a simplification, either deliberate or unintentional. Lesson number 2. Natural hydrogen had been meticulously studied for several decades. So if you hear or read that nobody knows nothing about natural hydrogen, please bear in mind that this is not true. Lots of people happily chirp about how eagerly they embrace the change, but very few do this sincerely. Number 4, this is a rather philosophical subject. Apply your critical thinking, they say. The modern official academia does not always demonstrate this capability, though, especially when it comes to geoscience, where new data arrives way too slowly, resulting in consensus models solidification into dogmas, which are hard to beat. Brands in science do exist, and by default, they become the first call preference for the new players. Who can blame them? If you tried something new and didn't succeed, what do you do next? You drop it altogether, or you try a different avenue, or you keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, hoping for the different, better result. It's up to you. And the last but not the least, if you are planning to continue, have you learned your lessons? Strategies. Natural hydrogen exploration strategies. So let's review some of the typical behavioral patterns on the natural hydrogen stage. Number 1, typical gold rush legacy mentality. If someone applied for this lease or that permit, this means they must know something, which not always so true in our nascent industry. Copy-paste of exploration method, very, very typical behavior. A very common attempt to employ the existing exploration methods without attempting to customize them, and it really doesn't work. Number 3, copycats. This is a very special type. We have seen both of these scenarios, best case and worst case scenario, in our practice. And the results are always pitiful. Sometimes an operator starts working with us, gets the first positive results, then stops midway saying, "Thank you very much. We now will take it from here ourselves," once again with little success. Drill, baby, drill. This is what's expected by the investors, which is once again the legacy from the petroleum industry, similar to number one here at the top of the slide. They must know something, which may not be true. And we have a couple of very expressive examples right in front of us. The last but not the least, lack of strategy. Well, I shouldn't really comment on this. Just a free tip. Don't be fooled by the flashy releases. There is often a quiet panic behind them. The best way to check is to ask for their exploration strategy and especially its scientific justification, and watch for the response. You should be warned if you are fed with too many knowledge gaps and academical uncertainties. So, what strategies do we propose for the natural hydrogen resources exploration? So, it's right in front of you. Some of you have already seen it. So implementing subsurface projects is no new business. This is being done for about 5,000 years. Similar to other industries, oil and gas and minerals, natural hydrogen exploration involves the risks indeed, which have to be and certainly can be managed and mitigated. The key is to perform a systematic multidisciplinary study in order to build the geology model for the territory of interest. At the same time, the scope of research is being narrowed down within each next stage, from the territory through the areas of interest to the distinct drilling locations aiming individual target structures. We propose a very logical and scientifically justified process where each next step is based on the results of the previous ones, therefore allowing to plan for the exit points. Natural hydrogen resources morphology. So the initial approach, the most frequently seen approaches toward the natural hydrogen resources morphology are as follows. So the initial approach, of course, it must be the same as the natural gas, as it was postulated by SPE in one of their releases. This governs the exploration strategy, indeed, introducing the hydrocarbons holy trinity: a source rock, a migration path, and a deposit sealed by a cap rock. Consequently, the explorers start looking for those things down below, but so far they fail to find them, except for maybe migration. Indeed, the comfort zone dictates to insist on keeping things in the same good old way, regardless the reality. Unfortunately, it's entirely wrong, because natural hydrogen is very different chemically from natural gas, methane. Both of these fundamental properties of hydrogen in front of you on your screens, which are very well known, are quite often being ignored. Number two, potential damage. Permitting hiccups is a good one here. There is a certain case in Spain. The company is waiting for the permit to drill an exploration well for 6 years, because natural hydrogen is treated by the regulator same way as hydrocarbons. So the current status, consequently, there is some shift, definitely, and we see it. Some of the researchers, bottom left, seem to be trying to quietly circumvent the concept we operate in order to arrive to the same conclusions without actually accepting it as a whole thing. Question is, what about the source? Where does all this hydrogen come from? Some of the reserve assessment agencies, bottom right, reluctantly started admitting the possibility of hydrogen fluxing towards the surface. However, they confess that they feel much more comfortable with the entrapment model, which is quite understandable. What do we propose? This is what our founders have been suggesting since the 1980s. According to the concept we use, which is independently proven, natural hydrogen forms the streams conveyed upwards through the chimney-like structures, becoming more complex on their way up. You can see it in the top left picture. Then, closer towards the surface, hydrogen starts dissipating into a sort of a fan, forming geomorphological impressions we often see on the maps and satellite photographs on the surface. The enlarged image on the right, in the center of the slide, illustrates this scenario we propose for the natural hydrogen resources development. As you see, it is suggested to drill into the core part of a hydrogen degassing chimney-like structure in order to penetrate it where hydrogen concentrations are the highest and the flow parameters are the most favorable for production. The first well in Nebraska, drilled by Nikolay, Larin, and his team, proved that the concept we operate is true and justifiable. Chapter number 5, hydrogen resources evaluation. Once again, the common perception of this rather important subject is very inert and has to do more with the comfort zone psychology rather than with numbers and algorithms, while the latter are involved too. Problem is, unlike methane, natural hydrogen is not known to form pressurized deposits, except for the temporary accumulations beneath natural cap rocks, which cannot be seriously admitted for commercial reserve evaluation. Replenishment is a must. So the current status. Thankfully, the industry seems to be on the right way in terms of admitting how different the situation is. As usual, this happens empirically, under pressure of inexorable facts, after spending lots of money and time, not as a result of systematic scientific research proposed by us long time ago. So what do we propose? Well, first of all, the flow rate is to be estimated in volume across the certain cross-section per certain standard period of time, similar to natural gas production wells, with choke, without choke. Hydrogen concentration in the gas flow is very important. The 10% commerciality cutoff is currently adopted across the board. Membrane technologies, in this case, are the most advanced and the most commercially viable these days. Fluctuations are very important subject. It's been covered by quite a few papers, scientific research papers. Sympathy to the petroleum resource evaluators who are trying to use the oil and gas algorithms for natural hydrogen resource evaluations. Hydrogen almost never manifests as it is in a pure state. The Mali is the only known exception. It commonly flows in a mix with other ingredients. Some of them are commercially lucrative, others are not. Dealing with them in a strategic manner is likely to become a separate domain of this industry. Okay, chapter 6, errors. So once again, it's a summary. We're not criticizing. It's just the result of our observations. Okay. So first of all, it is perfectly understandable that the start-uppers who just entered the subject are looking for the answers with the mainstream academia. However, at some point, people may get wary of unresolved questions despite the regalia. This well-explainable tendency of clinging to the customary ways result in a sight-folded and side-blinded approach when the players voluntarily limit their scope of view. Falling for traditional exploration algorithms is typical for those juniors whose founders come from the oil and gas path, naturally bearing the legacy of their professional experience. Nothing new and perfectly explainable. This approach, however, does not result in successful exploration campaigns. The downside of a premature IPO is that the listed company steps from now and on are governed by the investor's expectations, which is sometimes far from what would benefit the operation. Same applies to the companies financed internally through the private equity investors thinking basically similar way. At the end of the day, money spent with little or no results. This one is the most detrimental to the progress of nascent industry dealing with a completely new commodity, requiring an unorthodox approach. Can we teach it? It's certainly worth trying. Hopefully, together, we can make some progress before the whole story is completely discredited by the numerous unprofessional and therefore fruitless attempts. Quick summary, something to take home with you. So, if you hear or read that nobody knows nothing about natural hydrogen, you should know how to respond after watching this webinar. Number two, natural hydrogen exploration methods are very different from the traditional industries because natural hydrogen as a substance is quite different from methane and even helium. Therefore, it originates, migrates, and manifests quite differently too. So, if someone got the button on the sophisticated device, whatever the name is, this is not enough. They need to know where to press this button and why. Drilling, completions, and production stimulation technologies are extremely well developed thanks to the petroleum industry, which we believe is 75 to 80% prepared to handle this task. The gap will be closed rather easily, provided that the industry possesses all the competencies and the talent required for it. Lots of activity. However, not all this activity in natural hydrogen domain is productive due to the reasons reviewed in this webinar. This statement shall not become a cold shower for the investors who hopefully will find courage to learn the lessons and move on with unorthodox but scientifically justified approaches and methods. Once again, having plenty of funding is not enough for success. Moving towards the end, we would like to offer a couple of quotes from two of the greatest minds who ever lived on the earth. Thank you very much. Question.
Thank you, Vitaly. And thank you for your attention. We'll now open the floor for questions. Please submit your questions through the DMs and through the comments. And we'll address as many as time permits. And remember, curiosity didn't kill the cat. Lack of awareness did. Let's go with the first one. USGS have calculated the Earth's underground reserve contains nearly 6,000 billion tons of hydrogen. What's your comment on that?
First of all, it didn't calculate, it assessed. The authors could have predicted the response from the industry and from the observers, and they stipulated it rather clearly in the preface, in the abstract, that this is the attempt to assess the potential volume of hydrogen stored under the ground, not in certain traps. They also disclaimed the attempts to assess, to evaluate the methods of producing hydrogen and so forth. Well, I believe it's as good as any other. And what we see, most importantly, is that with time, once again, we watch this space rather close for several decades. With time, these numbers keep growing, not because the volume of hydrogen is growing physically, but because our knowledge about this subject progresses. So the more we know, the higher the numbers are, which is good, and it's naturally explained.
What do you see as the core limitation of the current exploration mindset for natural hydrogen?
Money talks, of course, and it's been stipulated, especially at the latest events, in the Natural Hydrogen Conference, Australian Natural Hydrogen Conference in Adelaide, and the summit in Paris, both taking place last month. The industry needs, the natural hydrogen industry needs, it's John Rockefeller. If you remember, the history goes in spirals, in circles. And before John Rockefeller, the bankers, the equivalent of the nowadays investors, they didn't believe the prospectors, the wildcatters for oil, and nobody really wanted to invest into something that they couldn't see and couldn't touch and couldn't smell. So John Rockefeller took the risk and invested into the first wells, aiming deep, relatively deep resources of oil, which couldn't be seen as seeds on the ground. So natural hydrogen industry requires the same. It requires systematic, justified, and conscious investment into multidisciplinary research about natural hydrogen exploration. Not wildcatting, not random drilling here and there, just burning investors' money, but a systematic approach. This is what's needed. The rest will come without any question.
Next question. What gaps in our understanding of hydrogen formation processes are most critical to address for achieving commercial discoveries?
They are a few too many. As of today, we counted about 20, maybe a couple of dozen different geochemical processes supposedly producing hydrogen in the crust. However, we just covered it in our webinar that none of them is capable of justifying the production of commercial quantities of hydrogen and trapping it. So the biggest gap is the majority of the players don't seem to be capable of leaving their comfort zone and getting enough courage to look into unorthodox alternative concepts or models, like, for example, the model we operate, which is already A, proven independently through the lab scientific research worldwide, and B, having our own very positive practical results. But nonetheless, and this is how the human mind works, and everyone are waiting for a big discovery somewhere, like as if they've been growing on trees. Sorry, it doesn't happen. They don't. We checked.
Question for Nikolay. What are your experiences from the field?
Вопрос про твой опыт из полевых работ.
Я начал ездить в экспедиции 40 лет назад.
I started going to the field for natural hydrogen about 40 years ago.
Последние 20 лет я только занимаюсь природным водородом.
For the past 20 years, I work with natural hydrogen exclusively, nothing else.
Next one.
За это время я побывал в Северной Америке, в Африке, в Индии, в Азии.
Oops. During my trips, I visited several continents. I've been in Africa, in North America, in India, Far East. Sorry, the line dropped.
Yeah, we have some technical problems with the connection of Nikolay, but we will continue with questions. So the next one is.
Okay.
Here he is. Next one for Vitaly. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have seen some news about sites for exploring natural hydrogen. May I know which one looks most close to commercial operation? Question by Harry Q, I think.
How are you doing, Harry?
Yes.
My contact in LinkedIn. Well, the thing is, we don't really know because we're not physically there, because some of the companies still operating in so-called stealth mode, which means they release absolutely no information to the outer world. Others have mixed results, which are sometimes hidden behind the flashy releases, which are immediately torn up by the experts online, leaving no fig leaves. So, in our opinion, once again, everything depends on the theoretical basis. The companies using the mainstream, the theoretical basis provided by the mainstream academia, there is a chance they may find a natural hydrogen source or resource. However, the chances of finding it consciously are very low. So, any of these finds, in our opinion, would have a great chance of being accidental, like thousands of others already existing, and we know about them through the oil and gas industry news. So honestly, we don't know, for a number of reasons.
Question from Bruno. Hello, thanks for the presentation. Do you think there might be a link between geothermal and natural hydrogen in crystalline basements? Thank you.
Well, I've been in my career with oil and gas. I've been on a couple of geothermal projects, one of them in the Philippines. The common thing is that both natural hydrogen and geothermal energy, they have their source from non-sedimentary rocks. Geothermal projects are mostly situated in the areas with the active volcanic activity. So they're very different. I really struggle with finding the common points. Maybe the common point is that in hydrothermal industry, they look for the flows of volcanic geothermal heat coming from beneath. In our industry, Avalio, our company, we're looking for conduits of natural hydrogen coming from below. So, but the rest is very different. Well, drill rig is going to be the same. So this is probably the answer.
Question for Nikolay. How far are we to a first discovery?
Как далеко мы находимся от нашего первого открытия?
Да,
Oops.
But he will reply when he's back. He is back. Yeah.
что считать открытием? То есть, если считать открытием обнаружение того, что водород концентрируется в струе,
Depending on what we take for
то
discovery.
это мы сделали открытие в 2007 году. Если считать открытием обнаружение структур дегазации, да,
If the
то
discovery
это было
is
сделано.
finding the flow of hydrogen, we have already discovered it. If the discovery is to discover the structure conveying hydrogen to the surface, продолжай.
Вот, да, то есть если говорить о, так сказать, успешных проектах, там, скажем так, есть случайные прецеденты, да, когда находили много водорода. Это можно тоже считать, так сказать, успехом. Но настоящий успех будет, когда специально пробуренная скважина водород даст водород. И я думаю, меньше года пройдет до этого счастливого момента.
once again, the hydrogen, natural hydrogen, had been discovered in many occasions accidentally. So we can't really call it a discovery. It's rather called a find. The discovery is when a well is drilled for natural hydrogen, and natural hydrogen is discovered by this deliberately drilled well. So Nikolay says he believes we are probably less than a year away from it.
Именно когда
And
речь идет о дебите, который, так сказать, не просто геохимическая аномалия, а дебит, который можно, так сказать, использовать на благо. Вот
And
это
we
будет
are talking about not just a geochemical anomaly. We're talking about a commercial flow which could be used for market purposes, for industrial purposes.
And just for the records, Nikolay is the son of a famous Dr. Vladimir Larin. Next question is from Jose Luis Caceres. Where would you target a first exploration effort with a high degree of confidence? How deep would you think it would be necessary to drill to arrive to the resource?
Well, the question where is governed not just by our wishes, not just by our whims or our understanding of the geology. There are a number of other factors such as administrative, regulatory, permitting, infrastructure, off-takers, and so forth. So, for example, there are several extremely attractive structures in Europe, but we don't really see any chances to drill a well there for us, at least for us, within the next few years because of the admin or regulatory burden. We approach this subject on case-to-case, country-to-country basis, or in the states, state-to-state basis, and almost every country has its potential for natural hydrogen. So the depth, the first well drilled for natural hydrogen in Nebraska by Nikolay and his team in 2019 was TD'd at 3,400, give or take 3,400 meters, almost 12,000 feet. But we have a feeling that with all the experience, all the experience we gained since then, we will be able to find hydrogen at more shallow depths. Best case scenario, commercially viable depth achievable by conventional drilling between 1,500 and 2,500 meters, give or take. But it varies it depends on the individual structure, individual geology tectonic setup, and so forth. So don't take it for granted. Don't quote me on that. It's very individual.
Seems like we've covered all the questions, and here's the last one from me. Imagine you have all the permits you need. You have $100 million. You have location that you want. How long do you need to find it?
A couple of years, because we spent the first year on the desktop study according to the strategy we have shown in the course of this webinar. Desktop study, then geochemical field 1, then geophysical field 2, because we don't want to leave any rock unturned, and we need to de-risk the project as much as we can and make sure we make the justified and very conscious decision on where to spot the first well, because we understand how the commercial risks, not the geology risks, which are always there, but the expectations are high. And the second here is to prepare for the first exploration well and actually drill it. It might take several months to drill a couple, 3,000 meters deep well. So This is what it will take, a year and a half to 2 years.
So we have a few more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Some of us are coming into the photo finish here. We have the one from Luigi Claveru. Sorry for my pronouncing wrong. Could you please share again the source reference regarding the well in the former USSR? URSS, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you very much for the question. I don't really. I know which well you're talking about. So, in 1980s, in mid 1980s, there was a flux of new ideas, and Dr. Larin's concept, which was deliberately ignored for several decades prior to it, all of a sudden started getting attention. And in 1989, there was a meeting at the Presidium of the Academy of Sciences of the USSR, the top scientific body back then in the country, which the meeting was dedicated to the presentation by Dr. Larin, explaining his concept and seeking the support for drilling a parametric or stratigraphy well, not even an exploration well, scientific well, in the Russian Far East, in Siberia, near the Baikal Lake, which is in fact nothing but the continental rifting zone. And this meeting was a success. The resolution, the minutes stipulated the full support of this project. And the action points were to start planning and to assign the needed budget to this project. However, this happened in 1989. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. And, well, the project was implemented on a smaller scale in another country, in the United States, 30 years later. So this is how history works.
Yeah. Next one from Ayawale FIFO. Great talk, Vitaly. Do you think geological systems that successfully trap oil and gas may also be suitable for containing natural hydrogen, given the difference in molecular size, mobility, and reactivity?
Okay, good question, and we partially covered it in the course of the webinar. The thing is, the answer is no. But natural hydrogen, and it is already being recognized even by the official, the mainstream academia and by the players, that natural hydrogen comes either in a flux or in a flux plus entrapment. So this entrapment thing is, we don't call it reservoir. We cannot really call it a reservoir because sometimes it has a cap rock which is fractured, so there are leaks. It doesn't really hold. So we call it temporary accumulation. And this is what we have in Mali. In Buraki Bugu, the wells drilled there, they have dolerite, sandstone for this temporary accumulation, and limestone or sandstone as temporary accumulation, temporary reservoir, and dolerite sills as cap rock. However, the first well, Bugu 1, been producing for 12 years. I just recently learned that it was shut due to the legislation changes in Mali, because it was sitting right in the middle in the central part of the village. It has been producing for 12 years from the depth of 110 meters, which is very shallow, from a, well, we can name it a microscopic quasi reservoir for 12 years at the same production flow rate, daily flow rate, 1,500 cubic meters per day, which would be absolutely unthinkable if it was a classic natural gas reservoir. So the inevitable conclusion is it must be replenished from below. So the team working on this project in Mali for quite a few years, they published the paper authored by Dr. Omar Maiga and his colleagues last year, stipulating this very thing. They postulated that if you are going to evaluate the natural hydrogen resource, forget about stationary model. We have to proceed with a dynamic system model. We have to change our vision. Unfortunately, these calls are not very often considered by the broad industry players and mostly, mainly ignored.
What are some of adaptations or new criteria needed for identifying hydrogen-specific reservoirs?
Once again, there might be a temporary entrapment, temporary accumulation in a quasi-reservoir, maybe not. We have to start thinking, even if we don't really want to, even if it's not comfortable for us, we have to start thinking in a different reality. Dynamic flows, vertical or subvertical, anisotropic chimneys conveying natural hydrogen to the surface. Identifying these chimneys, and within them, identifying the most productive zones, because they are very anisotropic within, is the goal. So penetrating, tapping into those most productive zones with drilling is the technical task, which is in our opinion, it's not really complicated. But before we start drilling, we have to go through this set of steps to de-risk the project and identify the right structure and just position the well in the right place, the right spot.
Next one from Abdurrahman Abdawi. Seems that people just woke up. Thank you so much. What are some common misconceptions and challenges associated with exploration of natural hydrogen as a sustainable energy source in Africa? And how can the continent capitalize on its potential?
Well, we don't really know much about the natural hydrogen industry in Africa. What we see in the public space, once again, we can operate the information we can access through the public sources. So Africa is no different from the rest of the world. It's just a matter of the investment which is capable of making it there. Scientifically speaking, it's all about the same. Legally speaking, there are some challenges in some African countries. There are some challenges with legislation because, like in many countries, and once again, African countries are not very special in this case. Natural hydrogen is not recognized as a commodity or as a source of energy, source of chemicals, and so forth. So not recognized as a natural resource. So this comes to the regulatory role of the local governments, whether they see any potential with natural hydrogen, whether they are motivated to move towards the better, greener future, and so forth. We're talking about philosophical things here, and every nation elects their governments. So the governments are, in effect, they express the views of their electorate, of the people who live in their countries, respective countries. So in Africa, some countries are on the way and quickly progressing towards admitting and recognizing natural hydrogen. Others are not. Once again, it depends on the country. So overall, I believe Africa is the African countries have all the chances of becoming the leaders in natural hydrogen industry provided the certain necessary steps are taken on the timely basis.
And seems this will be the final one from John
Karaganidis.
Karaganidis.
How are you, John?
What are the various extraction techniques that can be used to extract the advocative hydrogen flow? I think this was a typo. Also,
Hydrogen
the
flow,
flow,
yeah.
can be well stimulated. What are your thoughts on the renewal rates?
Thank you very much. There are several questions in one, so I will address them one by one. So we have several techniques. We use geochemical techniques for identifying natural hydrogen anomalies on the surface. And John and QIMC, the company he is heading in Quebec, they successfully use the surface soil gas geochemistry methods in their practices, and very successfully, because they follow the vertical advective chimneys model, very similar to what we use. Praise for that. So we developed this surface gas detection method in 2007, 2008, and we have the proof on the web. And then we use soil sampling for identifying natural hydrogen concentrations through gas chromatography. Geophysical methods we are using are very time proven. We don't really invent the things, because we have plenty of choice among the existing methods. And there is a special certain interpretation of conventional seismic, because conventional seismic, for example, it doesn't work as is, because it was originally designed for lateral, quasi-lateral dome-like structures, and it doesn't really see the vertical subvertical structures 60 degrees and up, between 60 and 90 degrees. So we use the third-party algorithm. Our business partners in Calgary do it for us. Other methods we use, once again, been developed a long time ago. We just customize them to our needs. And all we need to find is the anisotropic channel and some fluid dynamics within it, which is semi-quantitative way of assessing this potential resource. So once again, we do what we do. We learn something new every day. We're not saying that we possess the holy grail, but we have all reasons to stipulate that we have some certain achievements in this regard. Sorry. Stimulation. We quickly touched the bases about the stimulation, orange hydrogen. The way it is proposed by certain industry players, just injecting water into BIFs and the mafic rocks, we don't think it's going to work due to a number of reasons explained earlier. The conventional oil and gas stimulation methods like swabbing, for example, or maybe even fracking, are not excluded, but we have to do quite a bit of work before we arrive to the definite conclusion. The renewal rates, the flow rates, well, we have it in the supplementary data. If I may, just a minute, if I may share my screen real quick. We have the numbers we collected from the open sources once again. Just a minute. Here we go. Yeah, sharing the screen here. So this is what we're able to find through the open sources once again. The flow rates may vary. So as the hydrogen concentration in the gas mix, once again, it's been covered in this webinar. However, once again, the problem with them is that, with the problem with these numbers is that all these finds, including the in famous well in Mali they were accidental. They were not deliberate. The numbers may impress you, like 8,900 kilos per day or almost 18,000 kilos per day. But once again, we cannot really use these numbers for any type of scientific analysis, unfortunately, because once again, it's not going to be a correct model, and some of these whales produced for quite a bit of time. Others were exhausted rather quickly. Once again, we cannot really use this data for any sound scientific model, unfortunately. But the numbers are here.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're back. These were all the questions we've got. It's great. So thank you again, Vitaly and Nikolay. Thanks for the presentation and answering questions. Also, thank you for your attention, dear viewers. We'll definitely do this again since there's a lot of interest in natural hydrogen. And this brings us to the end of today's webinar. We hope this session has provided valuable insights into natural hydrogen exploration. Stay connected, keep questioning, and continue the conversation. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. May your ideas be ever as abundant as hydrogen atoms in the universe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.